What's up, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Wizards Latest. I'm your host and DC sports fan, Ben Robertson, and on this page, we break down all the biggest headlines surrounding the Washington Wizards. So, today, I want to chat a little bit about the Kawhi Leonard situation, why it relates to the Wizards more than you might think. Then, we'll chat about Alex Sarr and Zachary Risacher just a little bit. Of course, we've seen them play alongside each other here this summer. Who will have the better NBA career? Then, we'll chat a little bit more about EuroBasket, give you some updates there. And lastly, as NFL season kicks off this weekend, of course, right after I record this video, gonna go check out that Cowboys and Eagles game. Boo to both of those teams, of course. Got my burgundy on, ready to go here for this Sunday. But are there any Wizards that maybe in another universe could have had a football career? Let's talk about it. Again, guys, thanks for tuning in, and thank you for all of the support here on the page. Like I said, want to chat about that Kawhi Leonard situation with the Clippers, of course, that has really just taken the NBA world here by storm over the last few days. Really, the biggest news of the week. And, you know, well, first off, there with that situation, if you haven't heard, of course, the Clippers allegedly tried to circumvent the salary cap by giving Kawhi a no-show endorsement deal. If guilty, could be in big-time trouble, millions of dollars of fines potentially on the table, loss of draft picks, maybe suspensions. Of course, the last time this type of situation went down with Minnesota, the league came down harshly on the Timberwolves. And my first thought when I sort of just saw this news, and honestly, it's something I haven't seen discussed really at all or barely even mentioned, to be quite honest, is wasn't Washington president Michael Winger the general manager of the Clippers at the time that Kawhi Leonard was acquired? And well, yes, he was from 2017 till 2023, of course, notably reaching the conference finals in 2021. They had a winning record in every year of his tenure there as GM. In fact, in his monumental bio here, now, of course, again, president of Monumental Basketball, it says he played an instrumental role in acquiring both Paul George and Kawhi Leonard before the 2019-2020 season. And, maybe it's very possible that this was just sort of all over his head. The maybe the allegations, again, this is all still alleged stuff, may just involve Steve Ballmer, this aspiration company. Again, I haven't seen Winger's name really even mentioned a whole bunch so far. Obviously, with that type of money, I realize NBA executives are compensated well, but it's not going to be him that's funding this whole operation. And I just wonder, I'm not saying that he was the one that orchestrated this, or maybe, wasn't even up to him, but I wonder, with the NBA not wanting to mess around with this type of thing, does just having knowledge of this going down, just having knowledge of this alleged situation, would that get you in trouble? Would it, connect you even now, with your with another team in another role? Are you still connected to that situation? So just, maybe Steve Ballmer's presence is so large with that organization that it would sort of shield, everybody that was under him from, any sort of punishments or something of that sort. But I'm really curious to see how that unfolds and if Winger's name even just sort of comes up at all. Again, I'm not saying, he was the one that is orchestrating this or really even had a hand in any of what allegedly, went down. But I am just curious, what is, having knowledge of this situation, if he did have knowledge of it, what does the NBA think of that? What does that mean for you and your future? Again, just really curious, honestly, to see how that unfolds and how that potentially what sounds like a really maybe crazy situation shakes out. But next thing I want to chat about is Sarr and Risacher. Of course, we've seen them two play a little bit together here with Team France over the summer. Of course, Alex Sarr now ruled out of EuroBasket play. And Risacher, I think has looked really good, to be quite honest. He's impressed me. Led them in scoring for the second time now in EuroBasket group play against Iceland. In fact, their final game of group play. Hold that thought. We'll talk about that on the next bullet point there in the rundown. But again, I think he's been solid so far, and overall, really coming out of their rookie seasons. Remember the number one and number two overall picks from last year. I feel like the consensus is that the Hawks probably got the better option there around the league. I feel like that's kind of what the feelings I feel that a lot of people are putting out there. I think that's maybe what's on people's minds. And just looking at the numbers, I know they play different games. Risacher, a 6'8" wing, but averaged 12 points, 3.5 boards on 45%, 35%, and 71% shooting splits, while Sarr averaged 13 points, 6.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists. Really like that number. But the percentages are what have a lot of people down on Sarr: 39%, 30% from three, and 67% from the foul line. All I'm going to say here about Alex Sarr is don't count him out of this conversation, of this argument yet. Let's see where his game takes him. Let's see as he progresses in the NBA. I'm not even going to say it's this year, but maybe when he gets to years 3, years 4, where he has gotten to, because he does have just that X factor like potential and upside that we talk about all the time with his fluidity, with his just shot blocking ability. Again, I will say this, I will continue to harp on this. I think he has defensive player of the year ability on that end of the court at his very best, and just excited to see how he can grow. Don't count him out of that debate of those top two picks from last year quite yet. Next thing I want to chat about, told you I'd get back here to EuroBasket. EuroBasket group play has wrapped up. The round of 16 bracket has been released. France will take on Georgia, and Serbia will take on Finland. That Finland matchup really going to be a high-profile one. Lauri Markkanen, of course, leads the Finland squad. If I'm reading the bracket here correctly, if France and Serbia take care of business in that round of 16, they're due for a quarterfinal matchup here in EuroBasket 2025. Maybe has lost some of its luster, even for us Wizards fans, with Sarr being out. Bilal Coulibaly isn't playing quite as well as maybe he was to start off the tournament. Not totally down on him. Think he's still had a really solid summer here. And Tristan Vukcevic, his role has sort of diminished a little bit with Serbia. I remember the first couple games of the tournament, I was going, man, I'm excited about how many minutes he's getting. It seems like as that's progressed, he's lost some of his playing time just a bit. Still, I think it should be really fun if that does come to fruition, to see some of our young Wizards go at it on the international court. Really fired up for that matchup. Also, should just be a fun rest of this EuroBasket tournament, not just with those squads that we're really focused on, but really just with the whole event. I'm pretty fired up to see how that unfolds. Last thing I want to chat about here today. Again, this is having a little bit of fun, but as NFL season kicks off here this weekend, again, got my burgundy on for this Sunday. Excited for that Commanders Giants matchup. Just kind of been thinking here, which Wizards, maybe in another life, in another universe, could have been football players. And, I'm not sure, honestly, how many of these guys these days really, you don't see as much crossover in between sports, I think, with the modern era of athlete. But I do know Bub Carrington. He played briefly in high school, but the one guy I'm going to throw out here for you is Cam Whitmore. And I've talked about him a bunch, about what his role is going to be and where he's going to be able to fit in the lineup here over the last couple days. But I think at 6'7", 230, you had a little muscle to Cam's frame. Maybe you got, your next Jimmy Graham, Antonio Gates, basketball to football type crossover star. Kidding a little bit here. Obviously, it's really tough to make that transition. I think people don't realize the amount of just how tough it is, obviously, to make the NBA, but just to play professional sports. And it's not just a skill thing. It's not just an athleticism thing translating over to football. You have to understand playbooks and offenses. It's just a very, if you haven't been playing football your whole life, you're not just going to walk into the NFL. I don't think, but I do think Cam with that frame, it's fun to imagine him in, a helmet and shoulder pads. I wouldn't mind seeing that, seeing maybe if he got started in high school, what that path would have looked like for him. I'll keep you posted on all the Wizards moves here right on the page. So make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons down below. Turn on post notifications. Keep tuning in every single weekday. Again, go Commanders here this Sunday. And thanks for watching another episode of Wizards Latest.